And welcome! If you have clicked on this video, hopefully that means that you know that my latest EP, Her, has also dropped today. I am here with my guests Noah, Beaverknot, and Traces to talk about how we basically made this whole thing happen. I'm sure it's going to be a great time, so stick around for it. And if you haven't already listened to the EP, well, spoilers ahead, so you should probably go listen to it now. There will be a link in the description. But anyways, let's go ahead and start this thing. So, Brian, take it from here.
All right. So, just to clarify, I didn't really help a whole lot with his EP. I sat in on the mastering for one of the things, but I figured that I'd come in and I'd ask them a few questions just to give a little bit of an insight into the writing process and the creative processes behind this whole EP. So, I guess for the first question is, let's talk the starting point. What made you want to kind of start this whole thing, put this into production? Tell me a little bit about that.
I got this one. Ryan texted me and said, I want to do this EP. And I said yes. And that's where I started.
That's true.
Sounds familiar.
As far as where it started on my end, let's see. Because around this time last year, I would have been coming off the release of, I think it would have been the Cat EP I commissioned. I was commissioned by Whiskers to do. And so I just finished that project, and I think it was at that point, it was time to start getting into a writing phase for things. And so, I just I get working and just throwing ideas at the wall. And, I mean, I've said this a lot to you guys and to other people, so it's probably going to be a little bit of white noise, but it really is a thing where it's like, for every thing you hear that I do, there's probably like 20, 30 projects out there you haven't heard that I've started something on but maybe not finished. So that's where it really started.
Ryan really is a lot of monkeys at typewriters, and then every once in a while you hear a ding and you're like, hold on, what was that?
Yeah.
he's the Voltron of monkeys at typewriters.
It really does feel that at times.
But, I think that's
just a fairly common creative thing, just to have a lot of work in progresses, or just kind of, I suppose, concept doodling would be a good way to put it. Not really creating for the sake of this is going to be a finished product, but this is just something just to get my ideas onto something, and if it turns into something greater, then so be it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah. No, it's just kind of the creative process, I think.
I just finished, I'm a writer, so I just finished building a filing cabinet for all of my ideas.
Like a physical filing cabinet?
Yeah, with hanging folders and everything.
Sounds about right.
That's hardcore.
Allow me to introduce you to a computer. No.
Oh, I haven't much of it digitized, but I'm a handwriter first and foremost.
Me too.
Actually, okay, that we'll get to that, because I do part of the process did involve that kind of thing too. But continuing the answers to the question, so it was one of those brainstorm sessions where I just sat down and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna make something. And I think I gotta remember which one came first, because two of them came within a couple of days of each other. And I want to say the chord progression at the very end of my unwritten songs is what was written first. I think I
Really?
had
Okay.
just taken a piano, like the
No,
stock piano on
actually,
Ableton, and
I
just
I actually I agree with that because these spoilers for ahead, but we wrote the songs backwards. Um,
yes.
and so I was like, "Hey, that's the motif we were writing against in the third, the song that was the first." And Ryan was like, "I know. I also did it
Uh,
backwards."
it
Yeah.
might be also worth mentioning that by the time I got involved in this process, Traces and Ryan already had like drafts of all three songs, pretty much down. So I came in pretty late in the game. So when I heard things throughout, uh, listening to each of them for the first time, I would be like, "This sounds like something you did in this song, like either an earlier or later one." And then they'd be like, "Oh, thank God, someone noticed." Like we weren't sure if it was like too subtle or too obvious or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
so
definitely a lot of things like that.
I did want to touch on that because it seems like a lot of these songs they sort of follow a common story and that there's a common theming throughout the three songs on the EP. So tell me about how you came to that theme. What
Yeah.
was the concept? What was the creation behind it? Who came up with it?
So here's where it comes back to handwriting. It was after I had come up with the let's see, it would have been the thing for my unwritten songs. I had gotten that like melody down. And then yeah. So I have a like book that I made myself just out of like cardboard paper and like printer paper at one point and bound it together just to like put song ideas into. And I'm looking at it right now, and the earliest mention I see is right after, funny enough, Brian, right after all my notes on various Eurobeat patterns. I have a page that just has idea, and it just says I hear her, them, you, crossed out, singing along to my unwritten songs, but now I know the truth, that blank not real.
It's like hardly like there's something there, but like I have no idea what.
Yeah.
It's like a
So
1% of the full 100%.
yeah. So initially for my unwritten songs, I think it would have been even before I had hit up Traces, was I was considering like, oh, hearing something singing along to unwritten songs. It's like, oh, maybe it's a song about like an artist that's like dreaming about like making it big someday, and like he's thinking about, oh, I can hear everybody singing along to all the songs I haven't written yet. And I sat with that idea for a hot minute, but then I couldn't go too much further with it. And so I set it down for a minute.
The minute
And
was too hot. You had to set it down.
yeah. And then like I have like a couple more ideas that I went through. Like there's probably like another 5 pages, and then on the next page it was a second without you on the top, and it just says, and in that moment it felt so true that I couldn't live a second without you. And I think I had written that after I came up with the chord progression for a second without you. And I think that is when I got the idea of like, hold on, what if these are part of the same story? And that, I think, is when I hit up Traces.
Right.
That feels about right because you had all the songs named when you came to me.
I think all of them except for her were named.
Yeah, because originally that was called Illusion.
Yes, it was. Because we for context, in a lot of the files that we did, we named it Project Illusion.
Man, that would have been way cooler. No,
But
but
yeah.
sorry, continue.
Yeah, because like I think one of the earliest ideas that we pitched was, at least for the first song, because clearly like the my unwritten songs and second without you started like that. For Illusion, before we really started putting it down, was like maybe it's him like describing like meeting this girl that's just like an illusion and whatever. And then I think when we got a little bit further along, we decided, no, that's too on the nose. We need to be a little bit more subtle.
So
Yeah, I definitely was like, that's too easy.
Yeah.
So you were trying to go for more of a like subtle feel to this story, more of an implied sort of not necessarily come to your own conclusion, but you didn't want to tell the story just blatantly outright. More, you wanted to tell it through, I suppose, more metaphor, if that's what
Yeah.
I'm hearing.
If
time.
I've touched a song, I do not like literalism.
My
Yeah,
man
and
loves his metaphors.
I'll be real.
This is a subtle hint to go back and listen to anything else I've worked on and maybe theorize on that too. Comment on the YouTube video. I don't know.
But yeah, like I even remember going in on this one, and I think I got to a point. It's like I think I had watched a video or something, or I had heard something, and I was like, and it kind of clicked for me, because like I mean, I'm good at singing lyrics, writing lyrics. I'm hit and miss at times. It takes me longer to do than writing the music end of it, at least. But I think I had seen something that I was like, yeah, I want to be heavy handed on using metaphors on this, and Traces was like pretty much like finally.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
So Traces, I'm gonna take it you wrote most of the lyrics for this. I'd presume it was collaborative, of course, but
So the problem with that is, and I think Ryan and I have discussed this on various projects before, because I must be useful because he keeps bringing me back.
well, if you got a
is-
resource, use it. I mean,
Ryan is incredibly particular about making sure a line works as a musical thing. So every single line is a Frankenstein's workshop of like idea after idea after idea. It's hard to say who wrote what piece of what final thing. Like, I would argue that there's some of these I know that are mine. Like looking at my unwritten
Especially
songs,
on unwritten songs.
unwritten like Forgotten Phobias, Tear Into My Helpless Heart Again. That was mine.
That
That just has
easy.
traces written all over it too.
But,
That's
but then we
Traces.
go over to her, and it's like, never known fate to be polite is the second line in the song, and that had like a dozen versions.
Yeah.
That line, we fought with that line over and over and over again.
And I remember coming when Ryan asked me to take a look. I zeroed in on that line like first thing, and you guys were like, "Oh boy, here we go."
Yeah.
And it is, and to speak on what Trace's was about the like Frankensteining thing. A lot of times, like, we'll look over not just like the lines themselves, but phrasing, syllable count, and even completely changing like the meaning behind it. Uh,
Scansion's another one we have to pay really close attention to.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
If you're familiar with the term.
I think the dimension that I tended to bring after, you know, which was after the sort of the poetry of it, was the how singable is this, right? Like how many consonants in a row do I have to, or does, you know, does the singer have to enunciate before they can get to the next vowel?
Yeah, and that's always one of the things that makes these songs very difficult and time consuming. Like, I mean, anybody that takes a look at my discography right now can probably see it's like there's pretty large gaps usually in between when I put out something that has vocals versus when I'm putting out instrumental things, just because the vocals just take forever and a day to write.
It's, and you know, that every change, like each change, or a change in any dimension has to reason with the other two, right? Like if something is hard to sing and, you know, it gets changed for that reason, well, now like we could be changing the very specific meaning and connotations with that word or the phrasing that Traces is like really not gonna like.
Yeah.
I like what words mean. I'm very particular about that. And I'm also pretty particular about good scansion, which is, for context, scansion is the specific pattern of a meter in any given line. You could, a good way to think of it is if a parody line lines up with a regular line, like a Weird Al song, he matched the scansion 1-to-1.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah, it's.
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say that I have not written lyrics a whole lot personally, but for those who have not written lyrics, there is a lot to think about because you have to think of things as like, oh, where are they going to breathe in each line? And if you change any of the words, that might change the breath line. That might change where that might change the flow of the whole thing. And you have to think of every meticulous little detail. So it's not changing just a single word has a lot more impact than the layman might think.
Oh God, or
Yeah.
God forbid you add a half, like like suffixes often can eat up an extra half syllable, because they require a hard stop.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Like there are so many lines that I remember we wrote that we were like, from like a poetry standpoint, we were like, oh yeah, that's nice. And then like I would sit back, like turn off the mic and try to sing it, and I'd be like, oh.
well, that's you know,
that might not work.
in linguistics, you can look up the phonetic alphabet, and the way it's arranged is by what shape your mouth has to make and where the sound takes place in your mouth. And the thing is, if you have to do a sound at the same place, you need a pause. And if the sound has to jump between two very distant parts of your mouth, from teeth to like throat, you have to have time to make that jump. And so the shifts between words get agonizing because like Ryan will go like, that's not going to work, and I know exactly, and I'm like, it's because we went from a T to a hey, and to is one of those teeth to throat.
Yeah. And
it's
yeah.
like, God damn it, he's right.
and to take a step back, 9 out of 10 times I don't make it any easier on us, because almost always, and I will say there was some exceptions while writing this EP, but almost always when I'm writing, I have the melody of the lyrics written first. And then
Yep.
it's a matter of, it's like, oh, we have to find words that fit that melody now. And that
So-
fit the idea of the song that we wrote down in some form of like a summary somewhere.
So
There's
you're
about as
telling
much.
me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's about as much wiggle room in Ryan's melodies as your average can of sardines.
Suppose it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. I think with the
So you
exception of my unwritten songs,
So
that
you're-
one had a few changes as we went.
So you're telling me that the melody of most of the lyrics was written first. So
Yeah.
would you say that like the music was mostly written by the time you got to the lyrics, or were they written more in like tandem with each other?
It depends on the song.
Good question.
It depends on the song. I would say okay, so my unwritten songs had the idea down first, and it was the first lyrics we completed. However, the melody for lyrics was completed in A Second Without You first. I think I had the near complete song of A Second Without You done before any of the others.
Okay.
If there's a right order to do that in, then I don't know it because it's so codependent
Mhm.
on one another, you know.
Yeah. So, like, I think that's honestly A Second Without You took a while for various reasons, but I think my unwritten songs, I remember telling Traces when we were going on it, I was like, I haven't like set much of this in stone yet. Like there were parts like the da 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 da, like those parts of the song, like those were set in stone. Those needed to be what they were. But pretty much any of the lyrical parts that came before it, it's like I had like the basic melody down, but I remember saying it's like, but I'm willing to play with these ones a bit.
And
And I
to
think
that
you can
point,
hear it.
one of the one of the really awesome things about working with Ryan is that if you can make a convincing enough case for why something should be changed, the way you claim it should be, um, then like he's very reasonable, and he'll be like, you know what, you're right, that does sound much better, you know. Uh, so it's a little weird to hear you mention as something as set in stone when like it's I guess never been my experience, but only because like if it's set in stone, there's usually a pretty good reason for it. You know, like it because it works really well in that song.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing, at least for those part of the lyrics that, for my unwritten songs at least, that made part so set in stone is because that was the first thing that was written, and the chords that were surrounding it were shifting and moving to be in a very specific kind of time. And at least in my head, I know it's like, okay, if I adjust a melodic line here, it's going to end up changing some of the notes in the chords in a way that might not be as pleasant.
Mm.
And so once that was down, it was pretty much down. But I think, honestly, I don't even know if I had written in any of the other instruments for my unwritten songs, other than any of the chord pieces by the time Traces and I started writing the lyrics on it.
I remember it was in a pretty bare bones state. You had melody lines, but I will say yeah, my unwritten songs probably had the most changes to like the verse melody lines that I've ever seen Ryan make in anything we've worked on together. He it was I was honestly a little I was like, wait, you're just changing it?
Yeah, I remember it caught you off guard a couple of times because I was like,
Yeah,
nope, I like that line, and I'm gonna adjust the music to fit it instead.
yeah, I was not used to that. I don't think you've ever brought me in on something this early.
Yeah. I mean,
Normally, like, you've kind of made decisions that you can't renege on.
yeah, I mean, a lot of the times when I've like called on somebody, it depends on what I'm writing. I mean, if it's an instrumental, I usually call on people pretty early. But for the lyrics, it's usually been like, hey, I have most of what's going to end up being this song. You want to help me with the lyrics? And then we're off to the races from there. The slow, slow races.
Nail races.
Gotcha.
Yes.
No.
So,
God.
you mentioned that you had a lot of difficulties with My Unwritten Songs. Would you consider that to be the hardest of the 3 songs that you wrote, or were there any
No.
difficulties in
No.
any of the songs that you'd like to, I guess, touch on?
Second Without You was the worst by
Second
far.
Without You was
Ride,
so
yeah.
difficult.
Huh. Really?
Like, My Unwritten Songs was difficult, but like the lines are long. There's a lot of flexibility there. So like we get an idea and then I could play with it. Space like that is putty when you're writing poetry.
But
Second
also, it
Without
was the
You,
first one we did, so we knew we were like, okay, we get the thing down here, and then everything else that comes after has to point to this.
exactly, yeah. It was like we drew the target with that one. And then A Second Without You is like attempting to hit it. The lines are shorter. Some of them are really short. There's long lines and short lines that need to play into each other. The chorus is way longer. Long choruses are hard because they take up so much of the song, but they have to be universal. So that makes them really tricky to write. Like,
Yeah, and then there were in the second verse and the second chorus, there's an overlapping line, and I remember one of the things that stumped us for a hot second was just like, nope, that held long note has to have the same vowel in it as the note that like the next chord is going to end on because that's when it's going to cut off, and if it doesn't, it's going to sound like garbage.
God, I forgot about that. I repressed that memory.
Like
Oh,
that
we
the
fought
s-
with that one line for like 2 hours or
at
something.
least
I swear, I fought Dark Souls bosses that were easier than that line.
and so and also I think this warrants kind of an explanation. Like obviously I alluded to it, it's like these projects in terms of lyrics would have started sometime maybe like a couple weeks to a month after what was it, me and Beavernaut's Eurobeat song. Why am I blanking on
Oh,
the
really?
name?
That long ago?
See,
It's okay though. I came up with the name, and I don't remember
Nothing
it
to
either.
prove. That's it. Nothing
That's
to
it.
prove.
Prove.
It was
Which,
pretty much.
okay.
It was pretty
I
much.
want to hijack. I want to hijack this and say, nothing to prove is so funny. Like
Nothing to prove is incredibly fun.
I know we're talking about the latest EP. It is like uncharacteristically funny
It's
for like a
actually
song
a little
released by
annoying to me
Ryan.
how funny it is. The chorus contradicts itself.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. Anyway, sorry.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
good. I'll take
so
praise for that.
the writing process for this had number one took months. Like we did not finish the lyrics until November last year. I think
That feels right. That feels about. And
we started before summer. I think
So this has been
Yeah.
like a 8-month process at least.
at least.
I mean, life stuff happened in there. Like there were big gaps at
there
times.
were massive
Right,
gaps
right.
Like
of
I
like a
spent
couple of
my
weeks at a
summer
time where we
moving.
didn't hear from each other at all.
Well, yeah, I spent my summer moving and starting a new job. So like, and also other stuff.
Yeah, and then I ended the summer moving to Massachusetts. So like there was so many moments where it's like, yep, start, and then we like get to a stopping point, and then we're like, all right, I'll see you whenever you're available next. And then a couple of weeks would go by, and we're like, hey, do you still want to work on this thing? Yeah, I still want to work on this thing. Okay, when's your next availability slot? Next week. And I was like, okay, we'll figure it out. And then we would get like another verse done on a song, and then the same thing would happen again. Like,
Yeah, it can be tough, especially like working remotely on these sorts of projects, because I know when we wrote Nothing to Prove and Retroglycerin, both times, we would try to write it like over Discord, and it'd be like, well, we made a little bit of progress, but really the bulk of the progress was when we were in person together, just kind of making it. So doing this entire thing at a distance with each other, I'd imagine that there was a decent amount of difficulty with this.
yeah.
Petition for the next EP. We do a sabbatical together.
Cabin in the Woods for 1 week. We're getting a week. That's all they'll give me.
Hey, man, that's like how Shadow Academy did their entire first album.
Yeah, there are
They just-
definitely a couple of albums that I have seen that it's like, yep, 2 weeks in a cabin in the woods or a studio out in the middle of nowhere, and just all you do is write music. So many great albums were made that way. The trick is you got to have the time and money to do that.
Yeah, the time and money helps.
Yeah, and in some cases, equipment.
Like a cabin.
Yeah, because I at least know in like my case, everything that gets made is on a desktop computer, and so unless it's moving around with me, it's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
no,
I guess we were touching on earlier works beforehand. So would you consider this to be like different than your earlier work? So people that are listening to this, perhaps that have not listened to your earlier work, would they be able to expect the same things from your earlier work, or would you consider this to be a vast departure from what you've previously written?
It depends.
no, there's definitely things on Technicolor Dreams that are like this.
Yeah, like Technicolor Dreams, even though a lot of it looking back is very raw because I wasn't as practiced in like the audio engineering end of things yet on that album. So like some of it is like less refined than this, I would say, but maybe melodically there's like similarities.
Thematically too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you're driving at the sense of like, will things sound the same as stuff like sound the same? No, but like there's stuff you've made that is definitely like in this vein.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like having this EP telling a 3-part story is not necessarily new because Technicolor Dreams, it's scattered in a way, but there's sections in it that are telling a connected story. Like, particularly if you go to Prologue, My Dear, and How I Was Wrong, they're all supposed to be paired up together. And that's why they come in that order on that album. Binary is somewhat similar, just a little bit more abstract in that it's an album that's starting from, having very slow, sadder or darker tracks before moving into more aggressive or happier, faster tracks. And then I think probably the closest connected track would really probably be like, in terms of telling continuous stories, would also be Night. Because, I mean, that's a sequel to Chasing the Sunset, like directly. And it probably, in the way it was written, is the most similar. Just because, Traces also helped me out a lot with those lyrics. Some of the instrumentation is similar at points to how some of the stuff is on this EP. And some of the language is going to be pretty close too. Actually, it reminds me of something funny because I think there was one point where we were sitting with the lyrics, and I think it was either me or you that told the other, it's like, what do you think about the lyric "beneath an absent moon"? And we were like, oh, that's kind of good in this line, but it's like, I think I've heard that somewhere before. And then we sat there for like 20 minutes, and then I think, Traces, you said, it's because we did it. It's in Night.
It is in Night. It is. I was so mad. I was like, how did I snipe that from myself from a year ago?
It was one of those things.
If it works,
like,
it works.
Of course it was. Of course it was us.
And the reason I figured out it was Night is because the melody, I wanted to put it, I was like, this sounds familiar. I bet this is a lyric I thought of while I was listening to whatever sounded like this. And the answer was no, it's a lyric I wrote while listening to what sounds like this. That's one of my lines.
I'm trying to remember what song it was that we did that.
Makes you feel
I don't
better.
think it was her. I don't think it was her.
No, it was, I think it was, I want to say, it was Second Without You.
I think it was.
Because that ooh rhyme, it was going to go with that ooh rhyme, which is there throughout.
Yes, that's okay. Because I think it was, it was a potential bid for that high note.
It was, and
And that's
I
what
was
made
like,
that line
I was like,
so
this is it, this is great.
frustrating.
And then it was like, no.
It's because
Gutted me.
I think
I
it
think I
really
had to
was.
just-
It's like, man, that is such a cool line. That's gonna work so well. Wait.
I had to like
No!
sit down for 20 minutes and just like rest. I was like, I have to just experience depression for a while. I will come back to like my feelings in a second, but right now they're a swirling vortex of pain.
Yeah.
So I guess to just kind of wrap this whole thing up, that, we've talked about your struggles writing. We've talked about the beginning and the end of the creation of this EP. So I guess just to bring it all to a nice close, what would you all say would be your favorite song on this EP? And then tell me a little bit, why you think that.
I'll let you guys start.
Yeah, okay. Traces, you go first.
I get, pick a favorite child and all that, but
I mean, for me, it's no competition. My Unwritten Songs is, I think, the most solid lyrically. I think it's like, from a lyrical perspective, it's beautiful. I love the story it tells. I love how we put it together. I love, the elements of realism mixed with these deep metaphors. I am especially a huge fan of the bridge. The bridge was so much fun.
I'm gonna sound so bad for saying this, but like, what's the name of the EP again? Like, what
Her.
is? It is Her. For some
Yes.
reason, I thought the name of the EP was My Unwritten Songs. So I was like, oh, real creative choices. But all
No,
right, never mind.
it's reductive in a different way. This is the one I think I wrote the hardest on.
Mm. My heart says My Unwritten Songs, though I do really like A Second Without You. It's My Unwritten Songs really appeals to my kind of the storyteller, I think, in all of us, right? Like, there are very delineated chapters to it. And the style of it changes drastically between all of them. And it's not afraid to cut away to it directly, to announce the change, um, uh, or to drop the floor out from under you and then slowly let it creep in. And I think it takes you somewhere, you know.
So I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but I have to agree with the other two as well.
Kind of glad you went last now.
So let me put it this way, for just context sake. Her, in a weird way, ended up being the hardest to write from a music perspective, even though compared to the rest of them, it's easily the simplest. And it's the most poppy, which is not a style that, number one, that I usually listen to, nor is it a style that I usually like write. Like usually the stuff that I have written before is more derived from stuff I would hear in like electronic music of various genres, or from alternative or progressive rock kind of things that I know that I'm just trying to like bring that influence in with electronics somehow. But yeah, with her, it was just hard from multiple levels, because writing the lyrics was hard on that one too. It's like honestly, like
How many versions of the last line of the chorus did we write?
I think at least 3.
I feel like it was more than 3. I feel
Eh,
like we just kept trying and nothing was working.
yeah, like there were so many things, because like there was one point where her I just had like, like the verses and the choruses, and I held on to it for 2 weeks, and then I listened to it again. I was like, nope, this is not good. And then I completely like scrapped half of the melodic lines out and re-put it back in. And so going back, like her was a labor of love, and I love it for that. And obviously I like the song singing. It's one of the best produced songs that I've made up until this point. So like don't get this as me bashing her. It's not. I love the song. But it's one of those ones. It's like it's just not my favorite on the EP. Second Without You is close, cuz just the way that one came together, like aside from how long it took to do the writing, was just great. And I love the soundscape on that one.
It's, I think, A Second Without You really exposes one of your strengths in as a singer, which is that like light airiness. that you have in your higher register, and I think it complements the rest of the instrumentation in it very well.
Well, thank you. Because yeah, that one took a while to sing too. Just because if nothing else, it was not hard to, for me at least, to write musically. It was very hard to write the lyrics. It was the hardest to write the lyrics by far, and it was also probably the hardest one to sing. Because especially that second verse, it always comes back to that second verse. Is just like there's nowhere to breathe. There's next to nowhere to breathe. And you just gotta have a really strong hold on the breath. Like I remember I was recording that one and however many takes in, and by the time I got done I was covered in sweat because I was just dead on focused and how much I had to like control like my diaphragm muscles to like get the breath support I wanted at certain points. But like I'm so happy with the way it turned out. And like and even again the lyrics were so hard to write, but I think like the amount of time it took was worth it because I mean some of those parts just come out so good. And I mean, I'll also say this about Second Without You. It has probably my favorite sound in the album in that like intro pad that you hear that underlines the chorus. I love the sound that thing had. Yeah, that's because to be real, it was probably that pad in A Second Without You and liking it so much that I knew I had to do something with it once I put those chords down. That got me to go, okay, this is the next project. So from that perspective, like there will always be a lock and key place in my heart for A Second Without You. But going back to the answer, it's my unwritten songs. I just
Copycat.
here's the thing. Here's the
Try an
thing I would
original
say
vibe.
about my unwritten songs. I have a feeling that it might it could end up becoming the most popular one on the EP. Time will tell about that. But it is not the song you would throw on your average playlist. And it's not an easy listening song either. It's intense at times, but from a musician's eye and from a poet's eye, I just find it to be candy.
I mean, I'll just say, having listened to all three of the songs, the ending of my unwritten songs is just beautiful. So if you haven't listened to the EP yet, anybody listening, I would very much recommend my unwritten songs. If
What are you
not
doing
for-
here? We just spoiled everything.
Some people like the spoiler, but if for whatever reason somebody, their curiosity got the best of them, and you had to pick one song, my unwritten songs would be the song. But go listen to all of it anyway, because they put in a lot of effort for this, and all of the songs are great. If you like musical symbolism, I would say this is probably Ryan's strongest album for that, by far. Not only that, the songs themselves are beautiful. I don't really have anything else to say other than that.
Yeah,
I think
I'm very proud of this.
this,
Something to be proud of.
really shows like the storytelling chops that of both Trace's and Ryan, for that matter. In it, especially when that translates to music. yeah, there's something about my unwritten songs that captures a loneliness which is only apparent as an undertone in the other two once you've finished the EP.
Yeah, like
I completely agree.
I think I can Traces, you'll probably be able to elaborate more on this, but I think a lot of the goal in writing this one was when you listen to it the first time, Her is going to be that song that you're just able to kind of like jam to and like have fun with. Then My Unwritten or Second Without You is kind of that one where it's like, oh, people got the phone with the flashlight on, waving it back and forth, kind of
The
feeling.
power ballad.
And then My Unwritten Songs is the song that you hear and then go, wait, what? And then you have to go back and listen to the other two songs. And then you realize that the hints have been there all along.
Yeah,
It very
no,
much is the, I guess, cornerstone song, the key to unlocking the true idea of the EP itself.
I mean,
The nature of the universe.
yeah. uh, if you want me to expound on this, Ryan, I'll say this. My unwritten, writing this in the way I did it, and the way I sort of approached the whole situation, and I don't know who had more lyrical direction here, but I feel like you did kind of let me off the leash a little bit on this. I was trying to engineer an epiphany. This entire EP for me was an attempt to be like, Advance was kind of like that. If you remember Advance off of Reaching, that was an attempt to do that in one song. This is an attempt. This one I was like, no, I'm going to really go ham on that idea. So I am going to. My goal is the first time you listen through, you end up confused, and the second time you listen through, you are sobbing in the corner.
Yeah. I that is kind of the unspoken, but I guess we're speaking about it now, kind of goal that with any song that's like driven to be highly emotional, like like as as uh as weird as it sounds, it's like I want to make you cry. Sounds it's kind of the
it is
goal.
Yeah, but it is that. But it's in like the way your therapist makes you cry. It's like I want to tell you a story that like makes you feel something. Because a lot of music doesn't do that. But then like you'll put on the occasional song from an artist you follow and your morning commute, and you'll be like, why am I sobbing in the parking garage?
Yeah. Like
And I love that. I that's my favorite thing music can do is sort of reach into my heart and pick out emotions and play them for me.
and it might be on whenever we did the podcast for Binary or something like that, but I think I noted, well, it could have been Technicolor Dreams too. I can't remember which one, but I might have said this before. But to a first time listener who hasn't watched this and doesn't pay attention to the lyrics or whatever, or at least doesn't pay close attention to the lyrics, they're gonna think that this is a like love album, which I think I've gone on record saying before is I never want to write just a straight love song. Like it's been done to death. Like for me, if I'm writing something that's going to be talking about love, there's going to be a twist. There was the twist in My Dear. Like they're there. They're always there.
In Ryan's case, the twist is often a knife in your stomach.
Yeah. I think you guys can vouch for this, for how much music we've all listened to. It's like probably the most common theme you hear in music is either like a love song or a breakup song.
Oh God, yes, I have
Yeah.
some friends that I also write music with, and they released an entire album of basically nothing but breakup songs
Yeah.
earlier this year.
And
I
it's
was
like,
Jesus Christ. And I'm like, both of you guys are in long-term committed relationships.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
it's like they're fun. They're like easy enough to write compared to other things because most people have like had that kind of experience before. Keyword most. Um, but like like ideally with my music, I want to be taking people on a journey with a story through something that they haven't experienced necessarily.
Allow me to take you on a journey into the cosmos.
But I mean, yeah, like as far as the musical direction in this, I don't, especially with my unwritten songs, it's like I would say my unwritten songs has to be up there with probably Sea and Space in Advance in being the most complicated and layered songs that I've written.
And even Advance is a little bit of a cheat.
Yeah, a
Because
bit.
like you just have two completely different sets of instrumentals that play the different sections. My Unwritten Songs kind of has that, but not nearly. Like Advance was like, this is a different piece part of the song. The tempo has changed. It's syncopated now. We are in a different world, and that's the point. So it's kind of like two songs that are spliced together.
Yeah, because yeah, like
This was
Advance was very much of a song of like very different perspectives, telling different sides of the story. Sea and Space, even though it doesn't have lyrics, is a continuous story, but one that keeps growing on itself and developing, and like basically showing from one set position two very different kind of concepts. But then my unwritten songs is one person's viewpoint on something that's happening to them and the various stages of emotion that that person goes through while dealing with it.
actually, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I'm reading through the lyrics and I'm just like, I think we accidentally made it the 5 stages of grief.
It's very possible. Like, because I think you can break it down into 4 distinct sections. Because it's got the, I think we described it as the initial, it's like they come back and they're not like there and they're trying to figure out why. And then the emotional breakdown. And then the realization. And then reaction. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so I think that's a pretty good point to wrap it up. I think we've said the things that need to be said about the EP. Does anybody else have any closing sorts of remarks, comments, any last words they'd like to get in?
Pumpernickel.
That's a good last word.
actually, before we go, how about you guys plug yourselves real quick? So tell us what you guys are up to, and then we'll sign off. And where people can find you guys if they want to see other things you've done.
I'll open the floor to the other two collaborators first.
Traces.
Sure. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Traces of a Headspace. That's all one word. I'd often stories with snippets of my poetry because I do spoken word poetry. I'll make it onto there. I'll often shout out any lyrical collaborations I'm involved in on there. Don't post a ton, but if you're looking for me, that's where you're going to find me.
Yeah, and I'm Noah. You can find me in the reflection of the water, in the whistle of the wind, and in the stony gaze of the mountain top.
Nice.
And I am Beavernaut, also known as Brian. I am an amateur game developer and also a bit of a chiptune musician. You can find me on SoundCloud at the Beavernaut, and I also post games under the Beavernaut as well. So if you've seen, normally just game jams, smaller projects. So nothing major. I don't post super often, but if I do, that is where you will be able to find me.
Well, thank you guys again for coming along with me to talk about the new release. I'm hoping that everybody else that's listening will or has enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed making it. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for having
Looking
me.
forward to the next one.